Hi everyone and welcome to the third episode of Media Talks, and I'm delighted to introduce my guest. He's the Managing Director of ZigZag Productions. It's Matt Graff. Hi Matt.
Hello, hi. Thanks
How
for
are
having
you?
me.
You're
I'm
welcome.
very well, thank you. I am just in classic Zoom way, going to stand up and just get rid of the big block that just came up in front of the screen that says recording now in progress.
Okay.
But
The joys of doing these things on Zoom, eh?
there we go. I can see you again.
There we go. How are you?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I've just come back from holiday. So
Lovely.
feeling refreshed and kind of ready to get into Q4, although we're well and truly in it now.
Yeah, well, holidays seem like a real thing of the past. The summer feels like ages ago.
Well, we didn't have one, did we?
Well, I went on holiday, but never in the industry has it felt more like winter is coming.
Do you want to elaborate on that now or in a bit?
Oh, we can do that in a bit.
Okay, great. Right, I'm gonna make a note of that. Right, Matt, tell me about your personal background. We'll talk about ZigZag in a bit, but I want to know more about you, kind of your background, how you started in the industry, and what led you to be the managing director of one of the biggest non-scripted programming production companies in the country.
Well, sadly, that is now ancient history as I get older. But it was I started as a runner for a few different production companies in central London, properly running as you had to in those days with tapes up and down streets to edit houses and
I remember
whatever
that.
else. And then went to Viacom, ended up at VH1, for the people that remember VH1, as a music channel that actually made programs and did live music. And I was there for a few years and then stayed within Viacom, did some stints over at MTV, all mainly as a sort of researcher into being a producer director. Thought I wanted to be a live music director. Then ended up in Viacom's emerging markets division, sort of launching and then running channels for the network across MTV, Nickelodeon, Viva, and all the what else did they have? Number of other brands. Mine's gone blank, but Comedy Central, a few other things. And launching them, I used to think we used to play Risk with the world, and so where don't Viacom have their brands, and we'll put a few brands into that country and see how we can do it, and under all sorts of different business models. So some were licensees, some were owned and operated, some were joint ventures, and my mind, I guess, was turned slightly towards the business side of the industry, and I found myself helping with sort of program licensing and consumer products and brand launches and all sorts of areas of the business that I hadn't come across before. And so when I finally left Viacom, I found myself in a much more business fronted place. I'd still been running production companies, head of production, sort of running internal production companies at Viacom, head of production, across channel launches, and a bit of international commissioning and a bit of sort of MTV format brand localization. So made Pimp My Ride in loads of territories and things like that.
Love
So
that.
So while I was still, had one foot very much on the creative side, it was the other side was getting very much business orientated and working across channel launches and owning P&Ls and all that kind of stuff. So when I left, I consulted for a bunch of different people and then found myself at ZigZag as a consultant, actually, and then stayed, and then in a commercial role, and then as the MD.
That's quite a journey. And a unique journey in terms of going onto the business side. I interview and chat to a lot of people that just kind of work their way up in the creative side. Was it a conscious decision for you, or was it just like, actually, I'm really interested in this entrepreneurial side of the business that not a lot of people get to explore?
That's a good question. No, it wasn't conscious. I think that, I was sort of forced to think more business whilst I was at Viacom. I think if I'm honest with myself, I'm probably slightly better at the business side than I was at things like directing. I know that most people in my position tend to have gone through a production management side more than a creative side to get to that place. For me, there was a sort of obvious flip. And I was on the other side. I wasn't in the sort of independent production sector. I was in the channels and brands sector. So that flip was slightly easier because I was already looking, from the commissioning side at, the programming budgets for different channels and how we would make them work and things like that. So it wasn't like I was only producer director. I mean, I was to start with when I was at Viacom, but that was, mid to late 90s.
Okay. And you mentioned that you started as a researcher and worked your way up and have kind of done more rungs on the ladder than maybe most, but we find, obviously, as you know, I used to be a producer and director myself, and now I run a recruitment agency, so I speak to people in our industry all day long. And I'm doing a lot of people a disservice by making this general sweeping statement, but I'm going to make it anyway, that there tends to be this thing in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years where people don't want to do every rung in the ladder. They kind of want to leave university and kind of go straight to the top. How important do you think it is? There's no right or wrong answer here, and as I said, that was a sweeping statement, but how important do you think it is that you do those rungs on the ladder and you work your way up? Because I did, but there's certainly a need for, well, there's certainly a desire for people to miss those early stages.
I don't think it's possible to do the job properly by missing those early stages. I think so much of what we know in our industry is born through experience. And yes, we all find really keen, ambitious postgrads who want to go in as a producer or as a director or something like that. And I think maybe with directors, you sometimes find that you can get a student who's made some amazing films whilst being a student, has got a real eye for directing and actually just gets an opportunity to make something and direct it, and it's acclaimed and everyone loves it, and they get loads of great directing gigs early on. It's not the usual route to market, but it does happen. I think the same thing's true of writers, but anyone that wants to be in production, whether that's researching, producing, that side, or certainly production management, you need to learn through experience. There are so many quirks of the industry and there's so much assumed knowledge when you take on a more senior role on a production, and without having climbed every rung of that ladder, you're not going to have that knowledge.
And how does the whole working from home thing that's kind of come about, not through choice but through COVID, how does that feed into that rung on the ladder, learning with your team, being out, how does that I can see by your expression that you have an opinion on this. Do tell.
I do, and it's not an opinion that's loved by everyone. I loathe working from home.
As in, you hate it, or you hate your team doing it?
Both.
Both.
I mean, for me personally, I need to get out of the house and have separation between life and home. Otherwise, I'll just be chained to my desk 24/7 without the ability to sort of break off from work at all. I still find it hard to break off from work, but that's me. But certainly cycling to the office or a commute helps create a barrier between work and life balance. But I think that we live in a creative industry. We're trying to thrive in a creative industry, and to be creative in a production, you tend to need that conversation over a table, and checking in and trying to book an appointment to ask a question on Zoom doesn't work. Yes, there are tasks you can do. You've got to write a script, or you've got to log something, or you're an area of the production where you don't need that creative conversation. Fine, you can do those from home, but nothing beats the creative environment, being in an office or in a working environment with colleagues, bouncing ideas off them and getting things right, and not missing things more critically, because things get missed all the time because of bad communication. And you need heightened communication to have remote teams. We have remote people here at ZigZag. We've done fully remote productions. We've worked with, you know, what COVID did give us, and our natural ability to Zoom and Teams and Google Meets and Hangouts and whatever else technology they throw at us. You know, there are advantages for it. You know, pitching, great. I can talk to clients in America without getting on a plane, or anywhere in Europe or wherever they happen to be. You know, that's all brilliant. We have hired production managers in Northern Ireland, series producers in Manchester, had remote teams running out of Southampton, you know, editors all over the place. And I think that's great. And I think that breaks down the absolute need for regionality and spend and quotas and things like that, because technology is helping us break those barriers. And we are hiring and recruiting beyond our sort of borders of being a London-based producer, which is healthy and brilliant, and I will endorse that all the time. But creativity thrives on having people in a room together, and experience and culture of business culture. I mean, we get junior people who don't want to come into the office, and they get no sense of company culture. Or, you know, when I remember back to my first few roles in production companies, you know, so much of it was about being there and making friends with the people you work with and having a drink after work or whatever it might be. And that's just a healthy part of life. Sitting in your room, I just don't think is healthy for anyone. I don't think it's healthy for anyone's, you know, mental states, or as I said before, being able to create a work-life balance. So no, I'm a real advocate for being in if you can.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an emerging trend this year. I think sort of post-COVID, I don't know what it was like for you guys, but everything kind of boomed. You know, talent, there was a real talent shortage, there was more jobs and there were good people. And it was the number one question I was always asked is, do I get to work from home? And I still get asked that question, but it's shifting. The company's demands for people to be, you know, people are paying huge amounts of money for these lovely offices to create this kind of culture and this work environment that no one's using. From my own personal experience, I think what COVID did allow, whether it's something that stays around or not, is because of the work from home it, not only, like you said, did it break down the barriers of regionality, but it did make you realize that you don't need a bum on the seat all the time for it to work. So it's that thing about being able to go to the dentist if you need to without feeling guilty. It's those kind of things. And I do think our industry would have been the last to have ever adopted flexible working. So I think in that, that's just my personal opinion, but I think in that way, it's definitely helped and strengthened our industry, and I think it's attracted a lot more people. But I do worry about these 20-somethings that have come out of university thinking that the idea, you know, the ideal career is to work from their bedroom.
Yeah, and look, I'm not anti-flexible working at all. And I'm not anti people working at home when required. You know, in the old days, it was like, oh, they're going to deliver my washing machine between 8 and 6, and they won't tell me when. Well, you'll have to take a day off. I mean, we don't live in that world anymore. Just work from home.
That's what I'm getting at.
Fine. Or, you know, I've got this task, I want some quiet, it's going to take me 2 days to do it. Fine, stay at home and do it. That's fine. What I don't like is the notion that every job should come with set working at home time. So you've got this trend for people wanting to come in Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, which is its own acronym. But that for me is not a thing. You know, having Monday and Friday,
the long weekend on the Friday and the Monday.
Correct. And I just don't think it's right. I don't think we're getting the best out of people. Not everyone. Look, some people are dedicated to their tasks, workaholics, will give you everything, will do their job wherever they are. You know, they could work from the beach and be doing a great job for you, but others won't. You know, others are more distracted more easily. I'm one of them. I'm more distracted more easily, which is why I'm here all the time.
Yeah, fair enough. So I mean, I touched on the fact that COVID was, in my opinion, it may be different for you, but one of the sort of defining moments of the industry. You've been around for a while. Other career defining moments for yourself or from the industry's perspective?
Well, I think we're going through one at the moment.
Mm.
You know, I said winter is coming. It was a joke. I'm
It's been winter all
optimistic,
year, hasn't it?
optimistic to a point, but you know, we are in the sort of perfect storm of, you know, we've been through other moments, you know, 2008, that sort of time when, you know, the ad market took a real decline. There was, you know, economic downturn. We know that when the year after that happens, advertising revenues go down at the networks. That means commissioning revenues tend to go down, which means there's less work for the production community. That's always been a thing. We've never experienced a time where that's happening as it is again, at the same time as all the consolidation that's been going on, the launches of all the SVODs, the realization that the average home won't have 6+ SVOD subscriptions a month, but there's a cost of living crisis as well. So they might have 2 SVOD services. I think all the SVOD players are feeling the pinch in that respect. And therefore their rate of commissioning is going down. But a lot of those SVOD players, like the Discoveries or the Viacoms, you know, with Paramount, have pulled money, I believe, they might tell us otherwise, but have pulled money off their main channels to fuel their SVOD.
Yeah.
And or they're commissioning more on a global basis and less locally because the SVOD's feeding the other, or they're, you know, feeding the SVODs. And so with the services going down, I just feel like commissioning across the board is going down. So when people from outside the industry say things to us like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much choice now. It must be a real purple patch for production and for commissioning." You're like, well, actually no, because if some of those SVOD services are only commissioning 5 or 6 projects out of the UK and non-scripted a year, and nothing more, and they're not commissioning half as much as they were on their main channels. Plus, we've got an ad revenue decline. You know, Channel 4, we know we're on the go slow for most of the year. They had their upfronts last week, which has been well publicised and broadcast. You know, they're now looking at picking up some commissioning for 2025. It's like, that's not the coming back online that we were hoping for. And you know, whether the BBC spent too much money on funerals or not is another conversation. But you know, all these things fly around at the same time, and you have got actually the perfect storm for the production industry and the amount of people out of work. You know, we've read a lot about this over the last few weeks as well. The amount of people that are knocking on my door to say, you know, what have you got? If you've got anything coming up, think about me, is, you know, massive in comparison to where it was. And I think therefore, you know, COVID was one thing, but we are now experiencing something else. And I haven't even touched on strikes. And I haven't touched on the strikes because actually we're a non-scripted producer. It has had an effect on the non-scripted industry as well, because I think a lot of US buyers have just closed shop.
Yeah.
And a lot of our non-scripted projects that might have been fronted by a well-known actor or actress, they're not doing those gigs either because they don't want to be seen to be breaking picket lines or profiting from TV at this time, even though they wouldn't strictly be breaking picket lines. So, you know, I think we're in a really difficult place. It's a tough year.
Very tough.
You know, we are, as a producer, ZigZag tend to look where other people don't. We work with a lot. We don't necessarily try and run our business or operate our business just by going to the usual terrestrial players in the UK. We are making a adventure series in China at the moment that's majority funded through a Chinese entity and partly through a Dutch entity. I went to Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago. We make a lot of football docs, and we were invited, and I just thought it'd be interesting to go and see. But you know, they're obviously trying to do a lot more in things like the football space, but also in film and TV. They're incentivizing people a lot. As there are a lot of Middle Eastern territories. And so we will go and have a look, certainly, or try and work with people that not everyone will work with or do work with, if it's right. But even looking in all those other places, things are slow, things are tough, and you've got to be careful when that happens.
You're the third guest that I've interviewed so far, although I've filmed more than this, but the third one that's out there, and every single one of them has spoken about the fact that they've all been in the industry a long time like you, and that they've all kind of said that they haven't experienced a year like this. Not quite as tough, like you said, where it's kind of coming from every stream. Some are optimistic, some not so. Some are concerned for the next 18 months to 2 years and how the industry is going, which obviously has a significant impact. Even with my business, I work in recruitment in our industry. If no one is filming and no one's making anything, no one is hiring, and it kind of has a trickle effect. We are absolutely inundated with candidates saying, please find me a job. I've never in my life had so many people desperate for work. Not that I'm trying to make this podcast negative, but I'm trying to, I spend my whole career at the moment trying to help people in our industry. What in your opinion does it look like for the next 12 months?
I wish I had a crystal ball. I'd be developing in just that direction. I am cautiously optimistic. That's what we like to say here, and certainly not ready to give up. So, and I believe that there will be opportunities to come. I think people are consuming content still in a way that they never have done before. I think the consumption is huge. It's not necessarily traditional TV, but it is certainly across the VOD platforms, the emerging AVOD platforms and fast channels. So the consumption is still there, which means that even if a lot of these programs are being run or operated currently or surviving currently on a large percentage of older programming and acquisitions of older catalogues, they will need to fuel them with great new stuff to keep them going and alive. And so I do see them ramping up again. What's going to happen with traditional channels? I don't know. I think there is, fast channels show us that there is room for a linear platform, but whether that linear platform has to be delivered in a traditional terrestrial way or even a traditional CabSat type way, I don't know. So I don't know. I fear for how long that will last, but that's more about being outdone by the technology rather than outdone by the need for showing that content. So I think that's replacing a broadcast operating mechanism doesn't feel as worrying for me as getting rid of a broadcaster, if you know what I mean. So if you look at ITV and their push to do more on ITVX or commission on ITVX first, that shows me that actually the terrestrials will live just digitized. And we know that there is a whole generation of people out there that don't watch linear TV anymore or don't watch traditional TV anymore. So you've got to play to the audiences, but there are also and I think fast channels are really clever. You've got people who want to be served up linear schedules, but in the genre or the program that they like to watch. So they're going specifically to a crime channel or a particular sport channel or an adventure channel, whatever it might be, or even individual assets, a pop idol channel or whatever it might be. So there's obviously the cost of running those channels is so low compared to the cost of running a regular channel that it gives real opportunity to do that. So I think there are exciting evolutions in our industry in terms of technology and how we serve customers with content. And I believe that there is still more, or there is more content being consumed than ever. So that keeps me hopeful. Quite who will pay for the content remains the burning question.
Yeah.
Because broadcasters seem to want to pay less. We're having to do more co-productions and complicated commercial structures to get things off the ground than ever before, and that comes at a cost as well. I think we did one show last year that was a crime show for A&E in the UK. We had a partner in Film Rise in the US, a distribution partner called Bowman Bridge in Singapore, and did all our post-production in Australia because of the tax credits that was going to come from. And this, that ended up with what should have been a 10-ep series, but actually was a 20-ep series because we had different hosts and voices for the UK and the US version. And all those deals for a, not a particularly large budget true crime series. And that's a level of complexity that we never have entered into 5 or 6 years ago.
But I guess it's that need to diversify because of the way, I mean, it's fight or flight, isn't it? What do you do if you don't do that? You fold. Yes,
I mean, correct. Danny, who I've worked with, always says that we have to zig while others zag, and I think he's absolutely right. We need to continue to change and evolve, and to learn new production techniques, production models, business models that go with it, funding models, whatever it takes, to continue to make the kind of content that we want to make that will satisfy audiences. I like what you said about cautiously optimistic, and I think that's just generally the feeling. I think everybody, we're all in this industry for a reason. We all love it. But what advice would you give someone who was, I don't know, graduated last month and is looking for work? Like, what would you say? Would you say, look, just go and get something else, bide your time, come back in a year? Or would you say, look, you just have to keep going? Well, there's some great booming industries out there. Renewable energy, be a lawyer. They seem to do well all the time. Accountant. No, I would say that there are still opportunities. I would advise not everyone who comes out of college to want to be a producer director. There are so many different types of work available across the production sector. Yet, I would say 90% of the postgrads who come and do internships or work experience and things like that with us want to be producer directors. And producer directing is not for everyone. I think production management is a really interesting vocation, and line producing, and that is underserved, and I think it's underserved because people don't know about it, and all the other areas around TV, whether it's distribution, whether it's channel management, whether it is fast channel, putting together fast channels. I don't think there is enough understanding of the wider world of the production process when you come out of college, and everyone just looks at the glamour of telly and thinks, I want to be a producer director, or a producer or a director. I found, if you go to shows like MIP, but you go with someone for the first time who comes from the production side, they look around that place and they go, oh, wow, I had no idea that the industry was this big, this wide, this diverse, this different, had this many facets and factors and whatever. So whether it's, I don't know, working in production financing, or, tax incentives, all the way through to prop building or audio effects, there is such a huge wealth of jobs in television that go into the industry not necessarily doing what everyone else is doing, which is saying they want to be a producer director. Agreed. Your reaction, what you said about people's reaction when they first go to MIP, that was my first reaction when I went to MIP. I was like, what? It was my first reaction. Yeah, I was like, what is this? The industry was fairly big because I travelled, I had the opportunity to travel to a huge number of different countries trying to launch channels and things like that. So seeing that infrastructure in those places was one thing, but getting there eventually and seeing the halls and halls and halls of stands, different providers and broadcasters and organizations and that provide different, you know, you were talking different services about, you know, recruitment or whatever it is, you know, catering,
no, I agree,
whatever area of production it might be, you can still be completely embedded in the sector without being a producer director.
Yeah, and like you know, you've gone onto the entrepreneurial on the business side. You know, that wasn't where you started, but it's where you are now.
But I didn't know that was an opportunity when I started in the industry to go down that route.
Yeah, no, I agree. Talk to me a little bit about working with Danny. So he's the CEO of ZigZag. Does he zig and you zag? How do you work together?
Yeah, a little bit. How do we work together? So Danny, I mean, it's Danny's business. He's founded it in 1999. He is doggedly tenacious, and does continue to evolve. Danny is both creative and entrepreneurial. Loves to develop and to pitch. He would tell you that I'm the details person that makes things happen when he does the initial pitch, but that's sort of how we tend to work, is that he will oversee development and pitch those ideas and sort of look for all sorts of different ways to pitch those ideas and people to pitch those ideas to, whether it's, you know, brand opportunities or, as I said, in all sorts of different territories. He will seek and explore everywhere, and I will try and make it happen from the practical side.
Yeah, and does that complement each other? Do you ever log heads and like, how far do you go when someone owns the business and you're the managing director?
I know we've developed a good sort of unspoken
understanding
way of working. I mean, yeah, he can actually make a noise these days, and I'll look at him and go, yeah, fine, and he'll. we don't actually have to speak to each other anymore. We just sort of know. We do clash. We do have disagreements. I believe part of my role is to be here as his no man, rather than his yes man, and to make him question thoughts, choices, ways of working, and to suggest different ones, more than just being a negative force that says no. He is much more optimistic than me in character. I am fairly optimistic, but I'm also like to think of myself as a realist. He is very, very optimistic, and I think that's important, and it's actually contagious.
Have you at any point kind of really logged heads where you're like, do you know what? I'm just going to let you do it because I just do not agree, or will he?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of
course. I've been working with him in one guise or another for coming up 10 years now. Of course. But we've never fallen out over anything. There have been things where I've said that ultimately it is your business, and if that's what you really want to do, that's fine. I fundamentally disagree with you, but that's what we're going to do. But that's also fine. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about, you know, no one knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years, and I appreciate that more now than ever, really. But if you had a crystal ball, what would you say, or where would you say ZigZag, or you, but you can answer either way, where will you be in 5 years, or where would you like to be in 5 years?
Where will we be, and where would we like to be? I don't know. I mean, like, if you ask anyone where they'd like to be who runs a business, they'd like to.
Oh yeah, on a beach in Malibu, sipping a cocktail. Thank you.
Well, no, I mean, I think that would be nice after the business bit, but during the business bit, obviously, I'd like to grow. I'd like our turnover to be higher, our profitability to be higher, make better margins out of production. Production is an awful margin business, and always looking at ways of improving that. And I think I'd like the business to get to a place where it just looks hugely attractive to others. and is going to command huge multiples. And if there was an opportunity to exiting is always a sort of interesting thing, because, you know, are you exiting just because you can, or are you exiting because actually it's the right thing to do for you as a person? It's ultimately not my choice to build. It's my choice to build the company up, or my job to build the company up more than choice. It would ultimately be Danny's choice to exit. Would Danny want to exit anytime soon? I don't know. You'd have to ask him. But I think my job is to build that company up and to try and, in 5 years, I'd like to think that I could more than double our turnover and get to a place where we are operating at the next level.
I have no doubt that will be the case. And just before I let you go, Matt, I'd love to just know if there's any career defining moments for you where you thought, either or maybe both, this isn't for me anymore. I can't do this anymore in the industry. I need to go and do something else. Or if that's not the case, any particular moment where that was a real standout defining moment where you thought, you know what, I've done really well now? Because we don't, as Brits, we don't pat ourselves on the back very often.
Last one first. Sadly, because of the way the business is structured, we rarely get those moments where we can ring a bell on a commission that's being greenlit. I often find that by the time we've finally squared off the financing for a project and got it all together that we can ring that bell, it's been such a hard slog getting there that you've lost all the enthusiasm to get up and whoop and punch the air.
I remember that.
Which I think is, you know, it used to be that you'd go and pitch something to a broadcaster and they, you know, you do a bit of work and you go backwards and forwards and whatever, and they green light it, and you could ring that bell and you could jump up and down and you could all celebrate in an office. It doesn't work like that anymore. So the triumphant tapping yourself on the back bit seems to have gone a little bit. In terms of, there are ever moments where you think this isn't for me anymore, honestly, often I think that, you know, I can self-doubt like the best of them. You know, am I the person that's cut out for this? Would someone else be able to do this better? You know, look around at what other people are doing, even though I try and focus on what we're doing rather than others. And I'm like, how the hell are they doing that? And we're doing this. So yeah, I have those moments of self-doubt often, but I think they ensure, or for me anyway, those moments of self-doubt ensure that you continue to look at what other people are doing and try and learn and try and evolve so that you can do what you're doing a bit better. Doesn't always work out like that, but
no, it doesn't always work out like that. And then lastly, if you has anyone given you any advice, or would you give anybody advice that really, something just stuck in your head and it really changed the course of your future or your career? Did anyone tell you something?
So one of my old bosses at Viacom and VH1, when I first started out, was a lady called Genevieve Doolittle, who was still very much a wonderful development executive, she worked at numerous places. When I got really stressed on something once years ago, she probably won't even remember telling me, she just said, always remember it's only television.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And that has definitely stuck. When all the moments where I think, you know, I get massively stressed or really worried, you know, what's the worst that can happen? Something doesn't go on air, someone, you know, we lose a bit of money, whatever it might be, it's only television. We're not saving lives. And I think that's a really important thing to remember when you're losing your shit over something. It is only television.
Yeah. I know that you know Kate from Woodcut, and I remember getting all flustered over something I can't remember, and she said to me, no one died, it's just TV.
Yeah.
But I remember, yeah, but this is my job, this is my life. She's like, Cheryl, no one died, like, get over yourself, basically, just stop it.
No, but I think it's hugely important.
Yeah.
And I like to think that simple thought stops you being an arse to others as well.
Yeah,
Because,
I agree.
as soon as you get that moment where you sit back, it's only telly, you realise that you don't have to be angry to others or to yourself.
It's so true. I think sometimes we put ourselves, I mean, I'm talking like I'm still in the industry in that way. I'm not, I don't make programs anymore, but you put such a huge weight on your shoulders that you're making this amazing content, or you've got to do this because it's got to get out of the door and it's got to go to QC and all this kind of stuff. And actually it's a job. It's a great job, but it's a job. It's a great job. I still miss it. I love it. But anyway, that's another story for another day. Matt, winter is coming, literally and metaphorically, but fingers crossed for us all. I really appreciate your honesty and your candid attitude to everything, and being really frank in this podcast.
That was a pleasure. Thank you for having me along.
Thank you, Matt. You take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.